I call the first game in a series the origin point, and starting with the origin point, or at least some type of version of it, like a remake or a reboot, it's pretty much always something I'm gonna recommend, because it's pretty much always an important playthrough for context. Now, that preface is not a segue into making excuses for Devil May Cry being a bad game, or that Devil May Cry is a bad game, or anything like that. It's actually a segue into how I really didn't know much about Dante as a character outside of my interactions with him in other games, which primarily came from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And it's really interesting because without the proverbial context, you might think Dante was just a demon-slaying, sword-wielding badass archetype, which he is. But he's not just that. In fact, at least so far, the most memorable bits of Dante were how sentimental he was. For example,
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
I start with all this to drive home that preconceived notions about someone or something often don't serve you. And in the case of games, you should play them for yourself, especially the first in a series, to really tap into these stories and characters. Because again, all of the aforementioned was a very unexpected part of my Devil May Cry experience. And it was really charming, actually. It really struck a chord with me in a way that, again, I just totally wasn't expecting. Now, let's talk about the jank. The bulk of the reason I picked up Devil May Cry is because, as a studious gamer, I know how important this game and series is to the action genre of video games. So, I wanted to get a playthrough under my belt both for my soul and for the culture. And after it all, I've gotta say I thought this game was pretty janky. To be clear, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'd say I have a legitimate pet peeve with when games are difficult because of the jank, but that's not really what's going on in Devil May Cry, at least not to the level where I think it's worth detailing. It's more things like not always being able to see the enemies because of fixed camera angles, and things of that nature. But on the other hand, the fixed camera angles actually give the game a really unique atmosphere. I think the one-liner is that a lot was accomplished with a little with Devil May Cry. And in that, I can really see the vision. I wouldn't necessarily describe Devil May Cry as fluid action combat by today's standards, but the game didn't come out today. It came out in 2001. In light of that, I can definitely see why this game was instrumental to the action genre, both from a storytelling and gameplay perspective. And after playing through it, I'm excited to keep playing Devil May Cry, because I'm sure that with each release, we are probably getting closer to the fluid action combat, which would be a great time in this overworld with these characters, so on and so forth. And again, none of that is to say that Devil May Cry wasn't a great time, because I had a blast. It was a real surprise when it came to the way Dante is characterized, and it was a real insight into the evolution of action games that was fun in its own way. Devil May Cry is not a very long game. I think my save file is just under 6 hours of playtime, which in the real world is only a few more hours than that. So if you're an action game fan and you want to stake your claim on having played through some of its lineage, I highly recommend this one. I played it on the Switch too. You could play it on the Switch or wherever you can get a copy. It was a really good time. Highly recommended. Thanks for watching.